Welcome back to the Rich Fritzky Show, and as ever, thanks so much for being with. When I arose 15 years ago from my 15-month fiery engagement with the Neisseria meningitis in late '05 and virtually all of '06, the thought of ever being 70 loomed as virtually unimaginable. And yet the unimaginable was made real last year, and it ushered in with a family breakfast at the Sparta Diner, and dinner the next night with Maggie, Billy and Becca, Tom and Amy, and Noel at our Quiet Man restaurant that I love in Dover on Sunday, March 15 of 2020. The very next morning, our Governor Murphy closed all restaurants and locked us down, and so too many other states, and the war with COVID was on. A war of hiding and barring the door and limiting access and quiet care. One President Trump literally, amazingly, and mind-numbingly denied and refused to yield to. But we most certainly did, and maybe, just maybe, both you and I are alive nearly 10 months later because we did so. Most certainly the unimaginable of 70 was met by another unimaginable, and here and now, ever subject to it, 9.5 months later, with a year virtually devoted to COVID, lost to COVID. We are yet again still shadowboxing with an even more alarming COVID assault upon our land, and awaiting the now looming and ever so real redemption via medical marvels and vaccinations against the same. Reasonably and understandably, frontline hospital and healthcare workers are being immunized first, and then those in nursing homes, and then I believe it's on to the elderly. So when, where, how, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, I do not know. I just know this. I know that release and redemption is most certainly out there. I must admit, recoil in disdain and anger as I witness the hypocritical congressmen and women and governors who so long denied its science and its sword line up for their vaccinations. Ironically, I'm also annoyed by the fact that the fat cats and tycoons who made billions on the backs of the suffering masses during the pandemic also line up for their vaccinations. For those with scratch and skin and power in the game, money, money, money ever assaults honesty and honor and justice, even insofar as vaccines are administered. Today I dwell on this and what was accomplished in spite of it all, on what may yet be accomplished in the days and months ahead, on the hope that frames a new presidency and some age-old issues that somehow frame it all for me. The designated leadership team of a new presidency, while well-intentioned and smart, smacks too much of the tried, true, timid, and tired to me. Their eyes are upon lessons taught and battles won in days gone by, and not so much upon the future and the new roads and the kind of bold gambles and risks that I prefer. For truly I believe it is a time for risks and boldness and daring do. But sadly, we're likely to but chip away rather than set loose the light brigade as I would like. As to my personal bubble, COVID notwithstanding, I have still these past 10 months seen my way through 4 classes at my beloved Seton Hall with students I always fall in love with, where we walk and commune with great theological and philosophical souls and literary forces in search of faith and promise and love and purpose. I posted 33 podcasts in 2020 post-COVID on all manner of subjects of what I like to look upon as thoughts of noble note. Oh, and yes, my book, Unfading Light, The Sustaining Insight and Inspiration of Abraham Lincoln, is in the world, is accomplished, available to all, and will, I pray, be read enough to justify the time, the effort, the collaboration, the commitment, the dream. As to what I long for America, I will indeed simplify today, for while my laundry list of causes du jour is endless, I but look to my priorities of 50 years ago, when I was a mere 20 in the youthful and greening spring of life in 1970. These 4 pressing issues that I cared deeply about back then. And the truth is, they still remain largely wholly unattended to. They were 1, an end to the war, what was then Vietnam. 2, action on the environment, on what were then hailed as clean air and clean water. 3. Action on universal health care. 4. Limiting access to, wait for it, what were then merely the handguns. Just the handguns. As to item 1, I remind you of my focus last week upon my sweet cousin Dave, who we lost in Vietnam, and with him memories of the old folk song, "Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing, where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago, where have all the flowers gone? Gone for soldiers every one, when will they ever learn? When will they ever learn?" It was sung far better back then by Peter, Paul, and Mary, Joan Baez, and other folk singers. Where have all the flowers gone? Gone for soldiers, everyone. Unto the young girls who picked them, and the young men they gave them to. Unto the soldiers they became, and the graveyards they filled, and the stone that bore their names. Unto the flowers that would rise again where they lay. Oh, when will we ever learn? The technology of war has vastly improved, so our death tolls in the Middle East today are nowhere near those of Vietnam. But nor do we count the dead Iraqis or Afghanis or Syrians or Yemenis. Harkening back to Vietnam, for instance, when we well counted our 55,000 plus souls lost, while never bothering to report on the dying of what was in the end the 2,950,000 Vietnamese and Cambodians. We cleansed our hands, as it were, by honoring the loss of our own alone, as if it was ever just about us, and not the damage we inflicted, the harm we did, whether merely collaterally or not. Relatedly, if you haven't already seen it, I beg you to watch the movie The Trial of the Chicago 7, released earlier this year on Netflix. It captures the Chicago August of 1968 during the Democratic National Convention. It should have been Bobby Kennedy, anti-Vietnam War candidate, should have been his convention, and in his stead Eugene McCarthy's, the only other one who actually ran, who was also anti-war to the bone. But not unlike today, the empire or establishment struck back with reckless abandon that summer, and Mayor Daley's fierce tactics foisted upon the anti-war protesters gave way in the end to President Nixon's America. About to enter college that fall, I was there in Chicago. I was on those same streets at that time. I tasted that very tear gas, and I held my candle in the park with thousands of others on the night that Humphrey was nominated, protesting a most absurd war that achieved absolutely nothing but horrific, inexplicable carnage and destruction. As to item number 2, the environment, I can proudly boast that I fathered Seton Hall University's very first celebration of Earth Day in May of 1970. I believe it was May 3rd. I brought in Congressman Henry Helstosky and both United States senatorial candidates and a host of other public and private leaders as part of an all-day program in the Student Union, as both the nation and state were in lockstep getting into the game in big ways back in those days. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency had just been born. They were boldly beginning to implement the regs, getting into the game on the then unknown specter of climate change and the prospective destroying of the earth. There can be no higher priority today for the specter of inaction insist upon the death of all things, a monstrously unacceptable option. Interestingly, there was but one voice then, as all Americans were on board environmentally. The industrialists had not yet begun their elaborate disinformation and misinformation campaigns. As to item 3, universal health care, I wrote a term paper on Senator Ted Kennedy's proposals in the fall of 1969. With little support, he would fight alone for a long time, and he fought long and hard up until the advent of the token beginning, what was the Affordable Care Act, which, while much maligned, at least managed to fundamentally insure more than 20 million Americans who had long been left out. But it was not an end, just a step. Medicare for all must be the end. For health care, most certainly, ought to finally and fully be recognized as a human right. A fundamental human right and not a privilege. Medicare is, at 2% administrative costs, the most efficient healthcare delivery system in the world. And it will, once propped up by all Americans upon full implementation, ultimately save costs for all Americans, rather than, as has been awkwardly and shamelessly argued, elevating the same. Note our America, the first democratic republic on earth, is now alone among free democratic republics who fail to provide health care as a right. Medicare for all candidates win, and across the length and breadth of Democratic primaries this year, where they polled on this issue, Democrats everywhere by wide margins voted as being in favor of Medicare for all. It is time we grew up and accepted the fact that government must be responsive to its people. Now. Medicare for all. As to four, yes, and believe it or not, 50 years ago, the enemy on gun control radar screens was just a lowly, simple handgun. Just handguns in the child's hands and access and prospective misuse and safety. Not the semi-automatic supersonic weaponry of today. Not the absurdity of open carry gun laws that allow public officials to be publicly threatened while exercising their duties in state houses, and our black citizens in the free exercise of their right to protest being threatened by private militia companies. I have seen enough weaponry on public display this year to sicken my soul, and I fear the very soul of our nation. Oh, sure, they may have been used infrequently, but the threats alone were mind-numbing and mind-boggling and downright insane. Good Lord, why, in even the wildest of the old Wild West, they had to check their 6 guns with the marshal upon entering Tombstone or Dodge City. Just how deep and how desperate is our mad plummet into the sordid world of the National Rifle Association. Had I my way, of course, we'd be the perfection of England, where even the cops have no access to the bullet. But we must at least agree to rid ourselves of the stark madness of open carry completely, and limit ourselves entirely to basic non-automatic firing arms, for home protection largely, and hunting, of course. Unlikely, I know. And again, as ever, dare I suggest that the sacred Second Amendment is but an illusion, proffered by Americans who know neither how to write nor to read the English tongue, for the right to bear is causal and contingent upon the need for the old armed militia that died in the dawn of the 19th century. The right is causal, dependent, subject to, etc., etc. The cause is long, long gone. So too, then, that precious right to bear. We remain the masters of our own destiny, ever capable of tapping the spirit and the mindset of the 60s alone, where the hearts of people did bring an end to Vietnam, did get the nation to first attack environmental degradation, did see laws implemented to better control even handguns, and were first beginning to view healthcare as a human right and not as a privilege. Others dropped the ball later on, but we, you and I, today, at the dawn of this new administration, we can change the damn world if we are of a mind to. Change America now. Insist. Change it in this new year, which is ripe with opportunity. Yes, your America and your world. Your goodness and your world. In the great hope and prayer that we will get more right than wrong in the new year, when all will someday, sooner rather than later, be released from the clutches of COVID, I wish you the happiest possible new year. One free from fear and rich in happiness, and maybe, just maybe, a shred of boldness from a much maligned and tarnished government. Take care, my friends. Thanks for being with. Have a great week. Smile upon your brothers and sisters whenever you can. And happy New Year.